the heart of a city that never slept, where voices echoed in every corner and people rushed through the streets with their heads down, there lived a young man named Karen. He was quiet, so quiet that most people didn't even notice him. He wasn't shy, he wasn't introverted. He simply understood something that most people didn't. Karen understood the power of silence. While others filled their days with noise, talking, arguing, debating, Karen chose a different path. He listened more than he spoke. He observed, took in the world around him, and allowed the noise to pass over him without becoming part of it. But silence wasn't easy in a world so full of distractions. People expected you to be loud, to assert yourself, to share your opinions, to be seen. And when Karen didn't speak, they often mistook him for someone who didn't have anything to say. They didn't realize that his silence was his strength. One day, Karen found himself in a meeting with several colleagues, all of them arguing passionately about a project. Ideas clashed, egos collided, and the room was filled with noise. Karen sat there, watching, listening, his thoughts clear but his mouth closed. At one point, the conversation grew so heated that it threatened to derail the entire discussion. It was then that Karen, calm and collected, stood up. Without raising his voice, he simply said, "What if we just take a step back and think about this quietly?" The room fell silent. Everyone turned to him, surprised by his quiet intervention. Karen continued, "Sometimes in the chaos, we lose sight of the bigger picture. If we just allow ourselves a moment of silence, we can see the solution clearly." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dominate the conversation. But in that moment, his silence spoke louder than any words could. The room began to quiet down. The noise settled. Ideas flowed more freely, and the solution they had been searching for emerged. Karen's calm presence had transformed the energy in the room. As the meeting wrapped up, Karen felt a quiet satisfaction wash over him. The energy in the room had shifted, and for the first time his colleagues were listening, not just to each other, but to their own thoughts. The solution hadn't come from a loud debate or forceful opinion. It had come from the space created by silence. In the days that followed, Karen noticed something remarkable. His approach, his silent strength, began to influence others. People who used to talk over him now asked for his opinion. His quiet confidence became a powerful presence in the workplace. But it wasn't just about professional success. In his personal life, Karen felt a deepening of his relationships. His friends no longer saw him as distant or passive. They began to realize that his silence wasn't a retreat. It was a form of respect, a way of giving space for others to express themselves. When Karen spoke, it was deliberate, thoughtful, and clear. One evening, a close friend, Ravi, asked him, "Karen, I've been noticing something lately. You don't say much, but when you do, it seems like everyone listens. How do you do that?" Karen smiled gently and replied, "It's not about saying more. It's about saying what's truly needed. Silence doesn't mean inaction. It's the space that allows clarity to emerge." Ravi thought for a moment. "So, silence is like the pause before a song starts? The space where the music can be heard more clearly?" Karen nodded. "Exactly. In a world full of noise, silence is where the real conversations happen. It's where you hear not just others, but yourself." Ravi sat back, clearly reflecting on Karen's words. Karen's understanding of silence had changed the way he viewed the world. It wasn't about avoiding noise. It was about finding balance in the chaos. The power of silence didn't come from isolation or withdrawal, but from the ability to create space, to listen deeply and to act when it mattered most. As Karen continued his journey, he realized that silence wasn't just about not speaking, it was about choosing when to speak and when to listen. He began to understand that true power didn't come from filling the air with words. It came from the wisdom of knowing when to be still, when to step back, and when to act. One day, Karen was invited to speak at a conference, a gathering of the brightest minds in the industry. The room would be filled with high achievers, all eager to share their ideas, their successes, and their visions. As the event drew closer, Karen felt a familiar wave of doubt. "Why am I being asked to speak?" he wondered. "I'm not the loudest. I'm not the most famous. What do I have to say that they don't already know?" But then he remembered what he had learned. It wasn't about outshining others with noise. It wasn't about forcing attention. It was about creating the space to share something real, something meaningful. On the day of the conference, Karen walked to the stage, feeling calm. The room buzzed with energy, filled with people talking, sharing ideas, and exchanging opinions. But Karen remained silent as he walked to the podium. He took a deep breath, looked out at the audience, and said only one sentence. In a world that never stops speaking, sometimes the most important thing we can do is listen. The room went quiet. Karen paused, letting the silence settle, and continued. We live in a world full of distractions, full of noise. We're constantly told what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. But true wisdom comes from taking a step back and listening, not just to others, but to ourselves. Our best ideas, our best decisions, don't come from endless talking. They come from the quiet moments when we allow space for clarity. As Karen spoke, he noticed the audience leaning forward, hanging on his every word. The silence he had created gave the room the opportunity to reflect. He didn't need to shout or rush through his words. His message, simple and powerful, was all they needed to hear. By the time he finished speaking, the room was still. Not in awkward silence, but in a deep, thoughtful pause. People weren't just hearing his words, they were feeling them. Karen stepped off the stage with a sense of peace, knowing that true influence doesn't come from what you say, it comes from how you make others feel. That night, as he lay in bed, he realized that silence had given him the power to connect, to be understood, and to make a lasting impact. He didn't need to compete in the noise of the world. He simply needed to choose when to speak and when to let silence do the talking. After the conference, Karen's life began to shift in subtle but powerful ways. He noticed people treating him differently, not because of his fame, but because of the quiet strength he carried with him. The power of his silence had left an impression, not just on the people in the room, but on himself as well. Karen's focus sharpened. He stopped rushing. He didn't try to fill every moment with chatter or noise. Instead, he allowed space for deeper reflection, for quiet planning, for the things that truly mattered. He began to realize that every time he made the conscious choice to stay silent, to listen, he was giving himself a chance to grow, to think, and to understand things on a deeper level. One day, a close friend, Arjun, came to him with a problem. He had been working on a project for months, putting in countless hours, but the results weren't showing. Arjun was frustrated, overworked, and on the verge of giving up. He turned to Karan for advice, expecting him to offer solutions or answers. Instead, Karan listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to offer advice. He simply let Arjun speak, letting the words pour out until there was silence. After a long pause, Karan asked, "What would you do if you took a moment to step back and let everything settle instead of pushing forward in frustration?" Arjun looked confused. "What do you mean? I have to work harder. I have to find a solution." Karan smiled gently. "Sometimes the answer doesn't come from more effort. It comes from stepping back, from silence. When you stop forcing the outcome, you create space for something new to emerge." Arjun thought about it, his mind slowing as Karan's words sank in. "You're saying, I've been so focused on doing that I've forgotten to let things unfold?" Karan nodded. "Exactly. The loudest voices don't always have the best answers. Sometimes, silence reveals the way forward." Over the next few weeks, Arjun took Karan's advice to heart. He slowed down, reflected more, and allowed the answers to come to him naturally. And slowly, but surely, his project began to take shape in a way it never had before. Karan's lesson had not only transformed Arjun's approach to his work, but it had deepened their friendship as well. Through silence, Karan had not just solved a problem, he had given Arjun the space to solve it. As time went on, Karan's quiet power began to ripple through every aspect of his life. The more he practiced silence, the more he understood its true potential. He had stopped living for the approval of others, and instead he focused on being true to himself. His actions, not his words, spoke volumes. One day, while walking through the city, Karan ran into an old friend, Rahul, who had always been known for his loud, boisterous personality. Rahul had a tendency to dominate every conversation, to fill every silence with noise. But today, something was different. He seemed restless, tired, and distracted. "Karan," Rahul exclaimed, "I've been thinking about you lately. You've changed. You're different now. You don't speak as much, but you seem so present." Karan smiled, surprised by the observation. "I've been learning that silence has a lot to offer." Rahul looked confused. "Silence? But that's boring. You can't just sit in silence all the time. You need to talk, to make your presence known. How do you get anywhere if you're not constantly making noise?" Karan chuckled softly. "Noise doesn't always get you closer to where you want to go. It's the quiet moments, the moments when you stop, listen, and reflect, that give you the clarity to take the next step. Sometimes we talk so much that we don't even hear ourselves think." Rahul paused, considering Karan's words. For the first time, he looked a little lost in thought. "You might be right," he admitted, though the idea still seemed foreign to him. "But how do you do it?" How do you silence the constant chatter in your mind? Karen took a deep breath, looking at the bustling city around them. You don't silence it. You create space for it. You give yourself permission to step away from the noise, to let the world go on without needing to be part of it. The more space you create, the clearer your mind becomes. Rahul nodded slowly. I've been so caught up in trying to prove myself, to be heard, that I've forgotten what it feels like to just be. Karen placed a hand on his shoulder. It's never too late to start. Silence doesn't mean inaction. It means choosing when to act, when to speak, and when to simply be. In that stillness, you find the power to move forward with purpose. As they parted ways, Rahul looked thoughtful, his usual energy replaced with quiet contemplation. Karan, on the other hand, felt a deep sense of peace. He knew the world would continue to be noisy, but that didn't mean he had to be part of it. In the silence, he had found his voice, and that voice was stronger than any words could ever be. The lesson Karen had learned wasn't just about staying silent. It was about choosing to let the world's noise fade into the background, allowing his actions to speak louder than any words ever could. Years passed, and Karen's journey continued. He had learned that silence was not just a lack of sound, but a deep well of power, one that allowed him to listen, reflect, and act with clarity. His reputation as a leader had grown, not because of the loud speeches he gave or the praise he received, but because of the quiet integrity that defined him. People in his life started to notice the difference. They admired his calm presence, the way he never rushed to fill a silence, the way he thought carefully before he spoke. His decisions were made with precision, his actions deliberate. The loud world around him seemed to fade into the background, while Karan remained grounded in the strength of his own silence. One evening, sitting at his desk in his office, Karan received a call from his old friend Rahul. Rahul was in a different place now. His loud voice had softened, his restless energy had calmed. He had been practicing silence too, taking time to listen more than speak, to reflect before acting. I've been thinking about what you said to me that day in the city, Rahul said. You were right. Silence is power. I've started using it in my own life and things are changing. I'm seeing my relationships improve, my work become clearer, and I feel more connected to myself than ever before. Karan smiled, hearing the change in Rahul's voice. I'm glad to hear that, he said. Silence isn't about avoiding the world. It's about creating space for the world to unfold around you without the need to control every moment. They spoke for a while, catching up, sharing their experiences. Karen realized that this was the true gift of silence. It allowed him to be present, not just for himself, but for others. His ability to listen had deepened his relationships, made him a better mentor, a better friend, and a better leader. That night, as Karen reflected on the journey he had taken, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had never been one to chase recognition, to seek validation, or to make noise. Instead, he had let his work, his presence, and his actions do the talking. He understood now that silence wasn't just an absence, it was a presence that